They say silence is weakness. That if you don't fight back immediately, you lose. I used to believe that too. Until the morning I smiled, signed my termination papers, and said absolutely nothing. My name is Laura Mitchell, and this is the story of how staying quiet for 2 full years didn't end my career. It rebuilt it into something that crushed the very people who tried to erase me. At exactly 8:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, the fluorescent lights on the 32nd floor of the Hearthmore Consulting building hummed with their usual sterile indifference. I was mid-sentence, explaining a risk mitigation framework to a junior analyst, when an email notification slid across my screen. Subject line, urgent meeting. Sender, HR. My manager, Patricia Lang, was copied. My stomach tightened instantly. In corporate life, meetings like that are never about good news. They are about endings. The walk to the conference room they optimistically called synergy felt endless. Every step echoed too loudly against the polished concrete floor. I passed coworkers I'd laughed with less than an hour earlier. Some offered tight smiles. Others looked away entirely. In an office, people can smell disaster before it happens. Patricia was already seated when I arrived, posture perfect, navy blazer sharp enough to cut. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it made her expression look carved from stone. She didn't meet my eyes. The HR manager, Mark, gestured to the chair across from them, his voice smooth, almost gentle, the way executioners always sound. "We're restructuring," Patricia said finally, her tone soaked in professional sympathy that felt worse than cruelty. She spoke in the same voice she used with clients when delivering bad news she didn't personally care about. Market shifts. Strategic realignment. Difficult decisions. Corporate smokescreens for one blunt truth. I was being fired. Mark slid a thick folder across the table. Severance agreement. Non-disclosure. Non-compete. Generous, he said. My ears rang. All I could focus on was the woman who had praised my performance less than 3 months earlier. I had led a merger that brought in over $10 million. This wasn't about performance. This was about control. "We'll need your laptop and badge before you leave today," Mark added, already moving on to logistics. A small cardboard box followed. The kind reserved for people being quietly erased. I looked at it, then at Patricia. "I'll need a reference," I said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, calculating. "Company policy prevents us from giving detailed references," she replied smoothly. "But you can list me as a contact." The message was clear. Behave. Don't cause trouble. Or I would make sure no one ever hired me again. I nodded. I didn't argue. I placed my badge on the table and walked back to my desk, already a ghost. A security guard stood nearby, pretending not to watch me pack my life into that box. A plant. A photo of my sister. A chipped coffee mug. No one spoke. When I was escorted through the lobby, the guard's polite hand on my back was the final humiliation. I stepped onto the sidewalk with nothing but cardboard and silence. The first days blurred together. Shock gave way to pragmatism. I polished my resume. Reached out to contacts. Applied to a rival firm that was a perfect fit. They required a managerial reference. Against my better judgment, I listed Patricia Lang. I even emailed her to let her know. She never replied. The interviews went well. Then nothing. One rejection after another. Always polite. Always vague. Always wrong. 3 months later, the truth arrived by accident. A junior HR coordinator forwarded me an internal email thread by mistake. One line froze my blood. We confirmed her employment dates, but Patricia Lang declined to recommend. Declined to recommend. In corporate language, that phrase is a career execution. Not neutral. Not safe. A warning flare that screams do not hire. That night, something inside me hardened. This wasn't neglect. It was deliberate. She wasn't closing doors. She was salting the earth. So I stopped applying. I stopped begging for permission to exist. And I started documenting everything. I built a private archive. Old drafts. Email threads. Project frameworks I had authored and led. Files stamped with approvals carrying Patricia's digital signature. I didn't know how I would use them. I only knew they were proof. When the sun came up, I wrote one sentence in a new journal. If she closes doors, I'll build the building. 2 years passed. I survived in the gig economy, consulting quietly, anonymously. Small contracts. No glory. But I learned patience. I learned the market's undercurrents. And eventually, a small advisory firm called Lendrix hired me to proofread a government proposal. They were smart, ambitious, and dangerously inexperienced. I saw flaws no one else noticed. I corrected them quietly. Then again. And again. Until they stopped calling me a proofreader and started asking me questions. 6 months later, their new CEO, Evan Rhodes, looked at my thin resume and laughed. "This doesn't match what you're doing for us," he said. I told him the truth, carefully edited. He hired me anyway. Director of Compliance and Strategy. No references required. Then the Department of Energy announced the Cal Renewables Initiative. A $420 million contract. Hearthmore's territory. And I knew exactly how they would bid it. Because they were still using my work. I found their past proposal in public records. My structure. My language. My risk models. And buried inside it, the flaw Patricia had dismissed years earlier. A compliance issue tied to prior advisory work. A clause she had softened. Ignored. Lied around. I didn't accuse them. I didn't warn anyone. I designed our proposal to be perfectly, painfully transparent. So clean it made everyone else look dirty. I embedded a checklist. A standard. A mirror. And when Hearthmore read it, they would recognize the ghost of the memo they had buried. But then I made a mistake. I forgot to scrub my name from the submission metadata. When the confirmation email arrived, it listed me as compliance lead. My name, in plain sight. 30 minutes later, a LinkedIn message appeared. 3 words. Well. Small. World. She knew it was me. And in that moment, the fear disappeared. Because now she would do exactly what I needed her to do. She would attack. She would file a protest. And by doing that, she would put everything she'd buried under a federal microscope. That's when I smiled again. Because silence had never been surrender. It had been strategy. And the real war was just beginning. The official notice arrived less than 48 hours after her message. Certified courier. Heavy paper. Legal language stripped of emotion. Hearthmore Consulting had filed a formal protest with the Department of Energy, alleging a conflict of interest tied directly to me. The accusation was clean, precise, and designed to kill fast. If the protest had merit, Lendrix would be suspended from the bidding process immediately. No hearing. No appeal. No future. Patricia wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to erase me and take my new firm with me. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday in Washington, D.C., a beige federal building with no personality and no mercy. The kind of place where careers go to die quietly. I walked in with Evan and our outside counsel, a woman named Anna who had the calm eyes of someone who never panicked because she always came prepared. Across the long mahogany table sat Patricia Lang. Perfect posture. Perfect suit. Two very expensive lawyers at her side. She looked at me with something close to satisfaction. She thought I had finally overplayed my hand. The lead procurement officer, Robert Davies, called the room to order. His voice was dry, exhausted, and sharp. He didn't care about drama. He cared about rules. Harthmore's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of corporate espionage. A disgruntled former employee stealing proprietary knowledge. An unfair advantage. He never said my name, but every word pointed straight at me. When he finished, the silence felt heavy. Davies turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell," he said. "Would you like to respond?" Before Anna could speak, Patricia leaned forward, voice dripping with professional concern. "Just to clarify for the board," she said, looking directly at me, "you were employed at Harthmore Consulting, under my supervision, correct?" It was a trap. An attempt to force the admission onto the record. She expected hesitation. Fear. Maybe denial. "Yes," I said calmly. And then I continued. "And my employment ended shortly after I formally documented a serious compliance risk involving Clause 17, which was altered against my recommendation by a senior partner." The air left the room. Patricia's smile froze. Her lawyer straightened abruptly. Davies sat up, interest sharp in his eyes. "That's a serious claim," he said. "Do you have evidence?" I reached into my briefcase and placed a small black USB drive on the table. It made no sound, but it might as well have been thunder. "Yes, sir. Everything is here." The technician connected it to the monitor. The room watched as I opened file after file. Original drafts. Email chains. Metadata. Timestamps. Her edits. Her signature. Her directive dismissing my concerns. It wasn't accusation. It was documentation. No one spoke. Davies stared at the screen, then at Patricia. Her face had drained of color. Her lawyer looked at her like a man realizing he had been lied to. Finally, Davies spoke. "Given this information, Harthmore's protest appears to be without merit. More concerning, however, is the possibility of intentional misrepresentation in your firm's disclosure practices." He paused. "This board will require supplemental documentation immediately." The hearing was over. Not with a bang. With a verdict disguised as procedure. The fallout was swift. Industry blogs whispered. Then reported. Then shouted. Harthmore was under audit. Their reputation, once unshakable, cracked. Clients pulled back. Partners panicked. Lendrix, suddenly, was the safe choice. The clean one. The firm that respected the rules instead of trying to bend them. A week later, during the final presentation, I saw Patricia again. She was still there, but diminished. Forced to stand beside the failure she had created. When Evan introduced me as Director of Compliance and Strategy, her eyes widened. She hadn't imagined this ending. I spoke calmly. About trust. About public funds. About transparency as character, not paperwork. I never mentioned her. I didn't need to. The contrast did all the work. 72 hours later, the email arrived. Awarded. $420 million. Project lead, Laura Mitchell. The office erupted. Champagne. Shouts. Tears. I stayed seated, reading my name again and again. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was restoration. Later that night, a message appeared. From her. You built all this just to beat me. I replied once. No. I built it so you'd remember my silence. Then I deleted the thread. Some things don't deserve to be archived. 6 months later, I passed the old Hearthmore building. The logo was gone. The letters removed. Inside, the lights were dark. A former junior analyst recognized me. He was carrying a cardboard box. Same as mine, years earlier. I gave him my card. As I walked away, a piece of the old logo fell near my feet. A fragment of metal. Heavy. Cold. I picked it up. Considered it. Then placed it back in the gutter. The past didn't belong on my desk. It belonged where it had always been headed. When they refused to give me a reference, they thought they were ending my story. Instead, they gave me time. Silence. Space. And the clarity to build something that couldn't be erased. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. If you believe silence can be power, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, the quietest people write the loudest endings.